Expressing my appreciation to you guys. Will be my last press conference as president of the council, and I want to thank you for your good work, because your work is so terribly important to making sure that our public is informed. And in an era in which we hear a lot about fake news, I think you should all be proud of the work you've done to make sure that Montgomery County residents understand what's happening here in our county government and how important that is. So I thank you for that. In that same spirit, let me just reflect briefly on the year. I'll be doing that tomorrow in a more formal way, but I thought this felt like an appropriate time in that same spirit to just share some broad thoughts with you. I think it's fair to say that this has been an unprecedented year. I took office as president of the council a month after the national elections and a month before our new president. And nothing has been the same since. And so the very fabric of our community has been threatened. Our residents, many of them, feel like their lives are at risk here in our county. And so the work of local government has been more important than ever, and it is more important than ever. And particularly distressing, of course, is to see that things that we have taken for granted in our country are no longer things that we can take for granted. The democratic norms that have guided our county and our country are themselves under assault. And it really has been among the most distressing years and the most difficult political years of my lifetime. And we have seen that in how people are so on the edge all the time. The fact that we've made changes to our security here at the county council is not happen in a vacuum. The reality is people are angrier than they've ever been before. And so it becomes more incumbent upon those of us that lead at the local level to demonstrate that we can do our work differently, that we do our work differently, that civility does matter, that coming together does matter, finding compromise does matter, being respectful of everyone does matter. And so I feel like our county council has done that work over the course of the last years. We did good work this past year. We passed a budget that didn't require new taxes. We fully funded our school system and even provided more dollars for pre-K to make sure that we make advances there. We have done a lot of work on the very future and fabric of our community in terms of our master plans. 5 master plans designed to create more vitality in our community and at the same time protecting our residential communities. So we've seen that the Purple Line has moved forward, and our county responded quickly to the things that we needed to do at our end with respect to that. We've helped our small business community by having things like the Business Solutions Group and microloan programs for aspiring entrepreneurs and the revitalization of Wheaton. And we've continued to work on economic development sets of issues. And finally, as you all know, we found common ground on the minimum wage bill, which was one of the most important pieces of legislation to come before the council during my tenure as president, and one that I committed to finding yes on and working with Sidney Katz and others. We were able to get to a 9-0 vote. And so I just say to you that this has been a most interesting year. And it does, in my judgment, underscore how important it is for local government to do everything it can, and how important it is that we do the work we do well. I also want to say that while there's a lot of conversation about the things that we pass in terms of legislation and other things, that we've had some incredible transitions taking place here at the county council level the notion that we would lose Linda Lauer and Steve Farber in the same year, the clerk of our county council and our council administrator, and to be able to fill those positions with people that we are confident will be able to do this work going forward just as beautifully as Linda and Steve have done for us all these years, is also important for people to appreciate that we have a lot of different work that we achieved this past year of keeping things going the way in which they need to go. So, with that overview, let's get to some mundane matters. I say that facetiously, like a savings plan that we are going to have to wrap our minds around starting almost immediately. We were shocked, quite frankly, to learn that the state has said to us that the income tax revenues are $65 million below what we had projected. In a world in which there is almost full employment and a stock market that has been going up, up, and up, the notion that our tax revenues are down is really something that we don't understand. But I am told that our finance department has checked and double-checked with the comptroller's office, and for reasons that we still don't understand, they have concluded that this is indeed the case. And so, given the magnitude of that, the county executive has said to me and my colleagues, we are going to have a savings plan. We've done this before. We did this in 2015, approximately $54 million savings plan. So we know how to do this work. It will begin with the county executive, of course, sending over his recommendations. Then each of our committees will take the work up, probably starting in January, right away. And I would assume we would conclude our work in January. But we will be looking forward? No, that's not the case. We are not looking forward to receiving the county executive's recommendations, but we will take them up and then we will act responsibly because we must. And so it isn't the best way for the new year to come upon us. It isn't the best news if I was the next council president. It isn't how I'd like to start my council presidency. So this is hard work, unpleasant work, because you are having to go back and reduce dollars that we appropriated, if you will, for legitimate public purposes that we believe in. And now we're going to have to make tough decisions. This morning we took up in committee a developmental disability bill that's important to so many in our community. People that help adults and others with developmental disabilities they're saints. I mean, they are so important to these families. And we have had a commitment to these families that we would pay 125% of minimum wage in order to ensure that they have people who are dedicated to this work and committed to this work and will stay in this work, because turnover in this field is really something that's very traumatic for families. So the committee today unanimously approved that legislation. I anticipate it'll go to the full council next week for final action. We also have a climate mobilization resolution that will be before us. Again, a resolution that underscores that we are facing a climate emergency. And I was proud that our county was among the first to sign the Cool Counties Pledge. In fact, I signed that pledge, one of my first acts on the county council. And that pledge was to reduce emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And the reality is that's not soon enough. That's not enough. We have to do more. We have to do everything we can. And so this resolution basically says we need the county executive's people to come forward with a plan in 6 months' time as to how we can accelerate this important work. I share with you that Moody's just came out with a report today that said that they would be considering downgrading communities that don't take climate change into account in their work. Because, as you can imagine a place like Broward County in Florida where sea levels are going to rise. Okay? How are you as communities adapting? And so that's why I think this work is so important for us, so that we mitigate the impact to the maximum extent possible on our community and do everything we can for the health of the planet. I want to just say that we had, I don't know if any of you were there, at our town hall meeting last week, was with our youth. And it was one of those inspiring moments, I think, of where our youth just handled themselves in a way in which we wish our adults handled themselves. They were so civil and polite, and yet shared searing stories of things going on in their world. And so it was so terribly important to hear from them, and it really was the best. And of course, they are our future. And so we don't have many opportunities where we hear from them in their own voice in that manner. And it was a very powerful time. We will be acting also tomorrow, I believe, on 2 master plans, White Flint and Grosvenor, Strathmore. It finishes up 5 master plans this year, all 5 of which touched my district. I am so glad to be done with master plans in my district. But these are 2 good master plans in which there's been very little controversy, that creates takes advantage of our transit, takes advantage of being right on top of Metro and Grosvenor, takes advantage of what's happening in White Flint 1, if you will, at the Pike and Rose and other places where we see we have the opportunity to create a new urbanism, a new urban vibe right there on Rockville Pike. And we transformed what was acres of asphalt and a strip mall on steroids into the new urbanism. And it really is. It's pretty sweet what's taking place there. And so White Flint 2 will build on that. I think that's it for me. Let's turn to you guys. What do you got?
On the revenue, this is a shortfall. People say savings plan. You're talking about budget cuts, correct?
We are talking about budget cuts.
To the current FY budget,
To the
one we're spending money. We're operating.
We are operating. We need to spend less than we had projected. And that means going into the budget and cutting things out mid-year that we otherwise, this is not work we want to do. It is work that we will need to do.
Most people aren't following how state and county government dovetail.
Yes.
Who blew it here? Were the projections out of line? Was the accounting as we go not accurate? Where's the error?
Well, quite frankly, we don't understand it in this moment either. What is the context? The context is of a county that really has almost full employment, and a county that has a lot of residents who do well in the stock market, and the stock market is doing very well. So everyone's expectations were that we would do well with our distribution that came out in November. The entire state is not doing well. We are not alone in that regard. So did we project more? Absolutely. Was that an error to do so? It appears to be, but for reasons that we don't understand in this moment. And so I am sure the executive branch is asking themselves that same question. We rely on that. We also have less inflation than we had projected. And with less inflation, that means our property tax revenues are impacted, because unless you exceed the charter limit, you are capped at the rate of inflation. So that independently has an impact on our revenue. So the combination of income tax falling way short of what we expected and property tax revenues that will be below what we expected means we're going to have to really tighten up. And in some ways that can be a healthy exercise. It's not something you really want to do, but it is something that is obviously necessary in this situation. and we're just going to have to be a more efficient, leaner county government, and that will be true, I think, going forward as well.
What does a 2% cut mean to, the county agencies? What does it mean for county services? How significant is that?
Well, it will depend on what the ultimate recommendation is. I've never been a big fan of 2% across the board, because then I don't think you actually do justice to the priorities of the county. So we'll see at the end of the day what the county executive sends over, but it's going to have some significant impacts. There's no question about it. But are we going to reduce public safety? I don't think so. The school budget has been pretty much established. So now you're looking at smaller pots of dollars as to where you can make this up. And so it seems like some agencies may have to do more. But that will be ultimately the responsibility of the county council. We take the recommendation of the county executive, and we will, I am sure, pass a savings plan. Will it be identical to what the county executive sends over? It almost never is. We will make different judgments.
Any judgments you want to say now, or?
I haven't seen their plan.
Well, honestly, I agreed, but are there any areas that you think now are ripe for cuts that?
I'm not going to predict what we're going to see in that regard. Really, we're all catching up. We got this memo on Friday afternoon, okay? So we're still trying to understand the scope of the shortfall. Is it 65 million? Is it 90 million? Is it 120 million? We don't know how big the savings plan is going to be. And so we simply don't have enough information to say to ourselves, okay, if the savings plan is 50 million, 60 million, 70 million, where are those dollars going to come from?
Do you see this hurting, for example, you put in, I think, $842,000 for anti-gang initiatives at the state's attorney's office, and for police, you put in another more than $400,000 to Health and Human Services, which recently came before you. Would those be endangered by something like this?
Well, it was one of the reasons why I identified public safety. In my judgment, the dollars that we gave our police and state's attorney to fight MS-13 are not going to be touched. This is one council member that would say, no, that has to remain a priority. So that's why I think, generally speaking, in the past, we've been very careful with reductions in public safety.
But would that extend to Health and Human Services, which hasn't even gotten to hiring the 8 people they wanted to for the anti-gang programs?
So I believe that will continue to be a priority for our county. There will be other, again, you start looking at every possible place in which you can find money, and then you make your priorities. And my priorities might be different than your priorities, might be different than my colleagues' priorities, but that's the work that we have to do, is to make sure that at the end of the day, we're both responsible in terms of being fiscally responsible and responsible to our community and how we do this work.
And when would these decisions be made? I think a lot of people who are going to hear this and read this go, okay, well, when will we know what's going to be cut? And what kind of timeline are you operating under?
So what I'm operating under is that sometime in the next couple of weeks, I would assume we will get a formal savings plan. All we've gotten at this moment in time is the county executive sending over a memorandum saying it will come to you. So our expectation is that in several weeks we will get the savings plan. At that point in time, then we schedule committee action with respect to that. It goes to each of the relevant committees. We will take that up, obviously, when we come back from our holiday recess. And so we do that in about January 10th or so, somewhere around there. And we will then be taking it up in committee, and I assume we will conclude our work before the end of the month. But it will be
before January.
Before the end of the month, I would expect. This is something that, obviously, the longer it lingers, then the less you are saving. So you really want to make these decisions as soon as possible in order to have an impact on the fiscal year. So it will totally dominate the agenda of the council for the next little bit.
how do you see that affecting what goes on in Annapolis? Do you go to them and say, look, because of this, we're going to need more assistance?
I don't know what the impact is on the state budget as well. So I assume if these dollars are shortfalls to our local governments, that there are comparable shortfalls at the state level. And so I doubt they'd be all that receptive to our raising our hand and saying, can you help me out? They're going to go, I'm sorry, did you look at my piggy bank? It's broken. It's broken too.
Any update on the Amazon bid?
No update on the Amazon bid. There are some things that are not within our control, and I don't know when they will be making their decision as to what's in the first cut, if you will. As I've said before, I may have drunk the Kool-Aid, but I am hopeful that we will make that cut.
Okay, so you haven't heard like a yes, no, maybe, nothing?
I have not. Anything else, gang? If not, thank you again for the privilege of sitting down with you almost every week and for your being really good stewards of our community and of the public and the way in which you've gone about your work.
May I have the privilege of asking the Bill Turk Memorial question?
Yes. To which I will answer no. But go ahead, ask the Turk question.
Is there anything about tomorrow's closed session you'd like to say today?
No. Thank you, guys.